Thanks all for coming today. Today marks the first visit to the American Givy Center here in Addis, and I'm deeply honored. I had the privilege to meet Dr. Abdurrahman, leader of the Yemeni community here in Addis, that has been such a good steward of this building over the last 80 years. Thank you so much. We're also pleased to be joined by British historian Ian Campbell, who I had the privilege of meeting just prior to this conversation, who was instrumental in publishing the story of Cornelius van Engert during the Addis Ababa massacre. Ian, Dr. Campbell, thanks again for coming today. I'm heartened by the former American legation building's long-standing role as a school for the Yemeni children here in Ethiopia for these many years. While there is still work to be done, as you can all see, it is good to see the renovations completed by our embassy last year have addressed some of the building's most pressing needs. Yet this building holds profound significance beyond its American ties. 87 years ago, horror unfolded outside these gates, as many of you here know. In 1937, rampaging fascists massacred nearly 20,000 Ethiopians over the course of 3 horrible days, in a tragic event known as Yekatith 12 massacre. Thousands of Ethiopians were targeted not for any evidence, not after any due process. At that time, my predecessor, many times removed, U.S. Chargé d'Affaires Cornelius van Engert, bravely sheltered behind these walls nearly 750 Ethiopians from almost certain death. I'm incredibly proud and humbled by the actions of Chargé d'Affaires van Engert and hope to carry forward his respect for the human right to life, dignity, and respect. Regrettably, many people across Ethiopia and across the globe continue to face the same fear that Ethiopians did 87 years ago here. Bandits, armed groups, and at times government security forces act with impunity in carrying out violations of these very same rights to life, dignity, and respect, reflecting a disregard for due process and the rule of law. Reflecting on Chargé d'Affaires van Engert's courage and moral integrity, I urge all actors across the country to remember the lessons learned from Yekatith 12. Even in, and especially in, times of war, times of conflict, human rights and human dignity of every man, woman, and child, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of religion or language, cannot be forgotten. The dignity of every human, and especially the safety of civilians, must be protected, especially in times of conflict. Thousands of Ethiopians paid the ultimate price 87 years ago because of their humanity was erased. Ethiopians know this much better than I do. Americans know this, the world knows this. Today, Ethiopia faces internal strife, and every country has a legitimate right to defend itself. But how a country defends itself reveals its character and will undoubtedly determine the course of future conflict and, more importantly, social cohesion today and going forward. Moreover, as armed actors continue to pursue political objectives through violence rather than dialogue, conditions remain ripe for abuse. Those conditions in which armed groups are attempting to achieve political aims through violence and the government's actions to oppose those efforts have an undeniable effect on political space. My country has experience with this. From the Civil War to World War I and World War II, my government has confronted these issues, balancing the need to protect human rights with the need to defend the state. So, with that experience, when we see reports that civilians across this country have been subject to extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detention, enforced disappearance, conflict-related sexual violence, and other abuses at the hands of a range of actors, we are deeply distressed, and those issues must be addressed with urgency and accountability, such as through a genuine, transparent, transitional justice process. Let me be direct. To those in Oromia, the OLA, you made a genuine effort to reach a deal at the negotiating table in Dar es Salaam. Don't give up. Make the effort to rebuild trust and seek the peace for which there is overwhelming public support. Too many people are suffering as the fighting continues. To those fighting in Amhara, to those that call themselves the Fano, please know that your rejection of dialogue does not serve you well. As in other parts of Ethiopia, it is innocent civilians who are suffering at the result of the continued fighting and battles. Many in Amhara are passionate that their cause is just. If so, you should make those arguments through dialogue and not violence. To those in Tigray, the TPLF, seeking to resolve outstanding issues such as internally displaced persons' return, I urge an inclusive, orderly, and dignified process that does not involve retaking the territory by force. Your full participation in national dialogue and transitional justice processes will be crucial to peace and stability, not just in your region, but throughout Ethiopia. To those whose responsibility is to govern the entire country, Ethiopia, the government here, the country has far more to gain through peace than on the battlefield. A security-focused approach will not resolve complex political issues. Detaining and harassing those who criticize the government will not resolve those issues that must be addressed. The political dialogue that Ethiopians need could be helped by releasing key political figures. All armed actors are playing a role in driving human suffering, including new population displacements across the country. This must end. I call for an end to targeting schools, health facilities, and water infrastructure, and for full and unfettered humanitarian access, which could include, as a starting point, a temporary nationwide ceasefire. Let me reiterate. There will be no quick wins on the battlefield on any side in Ethiopia. Dragging out the conflict in hopes of achieving one only brings more hurt and suffering on the Ethiopian people with no real result. This is why the time for dialogue is now. All sides should take advantage of the opportunity the national dialogue mechanism offers. Imperfect though it may be, they are open to having all voices heard, including armed actors. This is a place to start the road to bringing all sides together for the betterment of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is not alone in facing the challenges of polarization, of hate speech, and of economic hardship that exacerbates our divisions. What defines us as democracies is how we confront challenges with transparency and inclusivity. This is why a real inclusive national dialogue, without conditions, is essential for Ethiopia. Countries across the world, including the United States, must work diligently never to overstep human rights to life, dignity, and respect. Throughout our history, the United States has confronted immense social upheavals as we reconciled our own errors of the past and present. We have faced criticism for having double standards and continue to do so today, including in Gaza. The United States is working every day to bring about a ceasefire and, hopefully, a permanent end to the conflict in that region. It's not an easy process, but we're not turning away from that challenge because it's difficult. Many of you are aware of student protests relating to the situation in Gaza across the United States and in many countries outside the United States. These are emotive issues as governments are challenged to respond appropriately. Responses from authorities have strived to balance the right to free speech with the right to access to education. These are difficult questions, difficult paths to negotiate and navigate, but we continue to try each day. We are committed to rectifying our errors, heal the wounds of the past, and ensure our society is just for all citizens. I know Ethiopians are eager to do so as well. Throughout 120 years of diplomatic relations, the United States has been present in Ethiopia, both in difficult and in joyous times. Both our countries have significant global roles, necessitating careful considerations of how our actions affect the world around us. Ethiopia represents Africa on the world stage. As the home of the African Union and as a symbol of African pride, for many, Ethiopia's actions have a ripple effect throughout the continent and around the world. A rights-respecting, stable, and prosperous Ethiopia is fundamental for the African continent. Let us strive to be inclusive, transparent, and consultative in how we approach challenges, forging a path to a more peaceful, prosperous world, not only for our populations, but for those in our neighborhoods and beyond. So I call all of us to honor the lessons Ikata 12 and to respect with both word and deed the human rights of all, regardless of ethnicity, religion, language, or alignment. Thanks again.